It's an honor to introduce this year's William P. Van Wagenen Lecturer, Dr. Alim Benabid, a neurosurgeon and a scientist who really does not need an introduction. But if I must, he is the father of DBS for movement disorder and neuromodulation. He has received many awards and recognitions, including the Spiegel and Weiss's Medal, Victor Horsley Award, Robert A. Pritzker for Leadership in Parkinson's Research, and most recently, Queen Elizabeth Prize for Engineering. And that's just to name a few. And before we do our discussion, Van Wagenen discussion, I would like to present him with this year's AANS International Lifetime Recognition Award. Thank you. Have a seat. So we thought we would do something different and do like a fireside chat. Thank you, Dr. Benabid, for coming. Now, you've pioneered the DBS surgery, and that's now a common procedure. I think yesterday we heard we do about 7,000 a year. And you launched the era of neuromodulation. Was there a moment when this idea of DBS sort of came to you? And was there like an aha moment where you thought this is going to work for tremors?
Well, there are always a lot of moments. One is more important than the others, is observing something that you did not expect, or that you were observing because you have been told by your mentors, be careful, do whatever you think you must do, but be careful, and if possible, tell me that before. So we were doing a thalamotomy in the ventral intramedullary nucleus for tremor, very classical. And what happened sometimes to those who were not really prepared is that making the lesions stopped eventually the tremor, but sometimes also created some side effects that you could not prevent before. So the idea was simple, that before making a lesion, mechanical or electrical, just test the area where you are, and how can we do that in the brain? Just by putting an electrode, which will be used for something else at the moment, but at the beginning, do something which is significant in terms of providing information, but also looking at what are the information which are provided this way. For instance, doing a VIM thalamotomy, you could make a lesion and see if it works or not. But if you are not perfectly placed, you may have side effects such as motor deficit. So the best way was to start stimulating at a low frequency and low intensity and looking at what would happen. And as long as nothing would happen, then you would increase the intensity, but also we started essentially to increase the frequency. And we know that low frequency excites, so tells you around what you have around the tip of the electrode. And doing this, what I saw, that stimulating at low frequency did not induce side effects. And then I wanted to see what would happen at higher frequency before making a lesion. So by stimulating at 30 hertz, you don't have anything negative. And then at 50 hertz and then around 60 hertz, what we see is that the tremor disappears. If you stop stimulation, that the tremor recurs. That's it. This was a discovery. And then the question was, how can I use it chronically under the guidance of my boss, Professor de Rougemont, who was very open-minded, very careful at the same time. Then what we did was that do several patients like this and observing that regularly going to frequencies higher than 50 around, then you would stop the tremor reversibly, and that also this could be done and redone again. So we decided, why not? Should we try to connect the electrode which was meant to be used for making a lesion to what was available at that time, IPGs, internal pulse generators, provided by different companies, and I think I thank Medtronic for their cooperation at that time. So we connected that and saw that the patient, when with the stimulator, would have the tremor, and if whenever we wanted or he wanted, we could turn on the stimulation at high frequency, and always we had this suppression of tremor and stopping stimulation, then the tremor would recur. That's it. So we decided to do a series of patients in different places, etc. I pass it on. And this is how started for us the deep brain stimulation of movement disorders without making any lesion and being reversible and adaptable. So we went to bilateral, and then we went to other targets, the pallidum, for instance, subthalamic nucleus, which was already always a little bit frightening, knowing that if you make a lesion in STN, then you may have very long and persistent symptoms, and then this is how it started. Then we had a program to go to different pediculopontine nucleus, multiple electrodes, combination of electrodes, etc., with recording also at the same time.
That's great.
It.
Yeah, fascinating. Now, surgical and technical innovations such as DBS is an integral part of our discipline. Now, when we introduce new ideas and changes to the treatment paradigm, we face some challenges. What challenges did you face when you were introducing DBS to the treatment?
Well, the challenge was that I might be useless, I might be doing something wrong, and as I said, speaking about frequency, it was easy to modulate. And then we had the possibility to test as many sites that we could, combine STN, GPI, and in some cases PPN, pediculopontine nucleus, then equip the patient with a long-standing systems, chronically implantation, and observe them, as we do usually in clinical studies, how this evolves, how is that stable, how is that permanent and accepted. Well, so this is the basis. And then from that, because Professor de Rougemont, who was a wonderful teacher, saying, do whatever you think, but before tell me. And if it happens to be slightly different from what you told me, and I accepted, then stop it and comment. So this was the circus and the circle of my education. I was basically a physicist. I had a PhD in physics before I came to neurosurgery, and then we looked at what could we do with what we know in physics, and this is what started to be the reason to create from the industry, and I thank several industries, including Medtronic, but others who were courageous enough to follow apparently foolish ideas and to construct prototypes that we started to do. Then we evolved to other activities, but always on the basis of being very cautious, trying to avoid the possible complication which might be expected, and if it happens, stop it, and if it doesn't happen, keep going and make it enlarge. And then we went to other areas than DBS, for instance.
So having gone through that and introduced a variety of targets and stimulation parameters, do you have any words of wisdom for innovators and researchers in our field who face these challenges today? What are some of your words of wisdom that you can pass on to us?
Well, the word of wisdom is we are in a difficult task, which is to deal with the health of a patient. And this does not allow us to make errors. So whatever ideas we have might or might not be useful, then we have to test them, particularly in animals when it is possible to create a model. An animal model is the safest way to approach. And if it works, slowly go to, with the help of the companies when it is possible, to the application to human patients, have a series of work with other colleagues, and quite often the combination comes with. And then you can introduce whatever you have at hand. For example, mathematical modeling, all the data processing that we have now with the spatial imaging, etc., which I love. So it's a really pleasant way to work in this area, and the patients are also good advocates, because when they have beneficial effect, they say that to their friends, to their colleagues, family, and to the other doctors, etc. So once you have shown that something which was not expected to be easily doable works, and works professionally, then you have to control and to spread the words and help people coming to your department and work on that, and include whatever you want. So now I have included MRI, of course. We are including also data processing at high level, implanting computers, and to the end, I showed it the other day, we go to the cortical interfaces to provide a new motricity, for instance, tetraplegic patients, and we have developed on this basis a multi-electrodes cortical permanent set of 64 electrodes on each side, with computing behind, and then we have built exoskeleton for arms to try to provide back to tetraplegic people, after most often a lesion of the spinal cord, motricity. And this is where we are now working on a tetraplegic tetraplegic patients with this type of system, and giving them the most adaptable level of activity that we could in rather easy way. It's easy to put a 50 millimeter implant with 64 electrodes, two sides, having some computing in the back, and then you have also to have developed 4 legs, 4 arms, 4 members, robotic prosthetic, and this is where we are now, having people with a spinal cord full severage and able to walk more and more better.
So I'm going to have one question for you that I didn't actually ask you before, which is, with you launching the neuromodulation era, where do you see the future frontier for this field?
Well, when there is something good, it doesn't have any frontier. It depends on the occasion, it depends on the need, it depends on the situation where you are, having a good system where you can work with, a good group of people, including your boss, and then also your students who are cooperating, and think will automatically aggregate. The important thing is still being cautious. Go as far as you can, stop when you are not sure that you are taking the wrong way.
So basically, there's no boundary, and you just have to be careful.
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to thank you again for being our Van Wagenen lecturer and joining us in San Antonio for our annual meeting. Thank you very much.
And I thank you also for giving me this extremely respected honor. I'm very, very proud and very happy to be here once more in California.
Thank you very much.
Not in California. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.